The deadbolt slid home with a small, satisfied click, and through the frosted glass of the loft door, Adeline Voss watched her husband raise his glass and laugh. The hallway light in the corridor had a sensor that took its time. So for a few seconds, she stood in near darkness on the wrong side of her own front door, in wool socks and a thin cardigan, the cold of the unheated stairwell already finding her ankles. Inside the loft, golden light spilled warm across the reclaimed oak floors she had picked out herself 3 winters ago. Spencer Hartley stood by the kitchen island with a tumbler of bourbon in his hand, and Sloane Briggs stood next to him in a slip of a black dress, one arm looped through his, her head tipped back, laughing at something he had said. Sloane was wearing the cashmere wrap Adeline had left over the back of the sofa that morning. She had it draped around her bare shoulders like she had bought it herself. They both looked toward the door. Sloane lifted 2 fingers and waggled them in a little wave. Then she said something to Spencer, and the 2 of them turned away from the glass and walked deeper into the apartment, into the warmth, leaving Adeline standing in the dark. It was the 2nd week of January in Minneapolis, and the radio that morning had warned everyone to stay home. Freezing rain over snow, a glaze of ice on every surface, wind coming off the river with teeth in it. Adeline could hear it in the stairwell, a low animal moan working its way through the old building's bones. Her phone was in the back pocket of her jeans. Her wallet, her keys, her coat. All of them were on the other side of a door she no longer had a key to, because 3 days ago Spencer had told the building super that he was changing the locks for security reasons, and the super who liked Spencer, who Spencer tipped at Christmas with cash in a card, had simply done it. A normal woman in her position would have started pounding on the door. She would have wept, would have run down 4 flights and out into the ice in her socks to bang on a neighbor's door and beg to use a phone. That was the version of this night Spencer was expecting. He had spent 5 years building a careful picture of who his wife was. A soft woman, a grateful woman, a woman who had married up and knew it, and in that picture, this was the night she finally understood her place. But Adeline did not pound on the door, and she did not cry. The shock of the lock turning had already burned off, the way frost burns off glass when you breathe on it, and what was left underneath was not panic. It was a flat, clean, almost peaceful clarity she had not let herself feel in a very long time. She slid her phone out of her back pocket. The screen lit her face blue in the dark. She won number she needed, and it was not 911. She thought very calmly, the only words that felt true. You have no idea what you just did. To understand the size of the mistake Spencer Hartley had just made, you have to understand the architecture of the lie he had been living inside, and the woman who built it for him. Spencer was a partner at Hartley & Crane, a real estate development firm in the North Loop that put his name on the glass doors and his face in the local business magazines. He drove a leased Range Rover the color of gunmetal and wore watches that cost more than most people's cars, and talked, at dinner parties, about being self-made. He had grown up comfortable and called it humble. He believed with the unexamined certainty of a man who had never once been told no by anyone who mattered, that he had clawed his way to the top of a hard city through sheer will. He had met Adeline 6 years earlier at a fundraiser for a children's literacy program, where she was helping at the registration table in a plain gray dress, no jewelry, hair pulled back. She told him she did bookkeeping for a few small nonprofits. She lived, she said, in a modest 1-bedroom in Northeast and took the bus. She seemed unimpressed by him, which is the one thing a man like Spencer cannot stand, and so he chased her with everything he had. And within a year he had married her. And within 2, he had convinced himself he had rescued her. None of it was true. Her name was Adeline Voss, and she had grown up in a trailer outside Duluth, the daughter of a woman who cleaned motel rooms and a man who left. She had watched her mother stay 17 years with a second husband, who counted every dollar and made her ask for grocery money like a child asking for an allowance. And Adeline had decided somewhere around the age of 9 that whatever else her life became, no man would ever again get to decide whether she ate. She was very, very good with numbers. Not in the way of someone who balances a checkbook, but in the way of someone who can look at a company's books and see the lie running underneath them like a vein of ore. She put herself through school cleaning offices at night. She became a forensic accountant, the kind firms hire when money has gone somewhere it should not have. And then, very quietly, she stopped working for those firms and started working for herself. She had a gift for seeing which struggling companies were undervalued because of a fixable problem, and a colder gift for buying them through layers of holding companies before anyone understood what she was doing. By the time she was 35, Adeline Voss controlled a private fund called Ironwood Capital that almost no one in Minneapolis had heard of, and that owned pieces of a dozen businesses in the Twin Cities. One of those pieces was Meridian Group, the parent company that 4 years ago had quietly acquired a controlling stake in a mid-sized development firm called Hartley and Crane. After that firm nearly collapsed under a bad land deal, Spencer had championed. Spencer had no idea. He thought Meridian was a faceless out-of-state investor that had bailed his firm out and then, mercifully, left him alone to run things. He had no idea the bailout had been arranged the same month he proposed to a quiet bookkeeper who took the bus. He had no idea that the loft on Washington Avenue, the one he bragged about, the one with his name on the lease, was owned outright by a property trust that rolled up, through 3 blind layers, into Ironwood Capital. He had been writing a mortgage check every month to a servicer that did not exist, and every dollar of it had gone into a fund in his wife's name. She had built him a kingdom out of paper and let him believe he was a king. She had not done it to trap him. That was the part she would have to make peace with later, in the long, quiet months after that night. She had done it because she had spent her whole life being wanted for what she could provide, and she had wanted, just once, to be loved for nothing, to be the woman in the gray dress with no jewelry, and see if a man would still choose her. Spencer had chosen her. She let herself believe for a while that it meant what she needed it to mean. And when the man she married began slowly to curdle, when the charm thinned and the controlling beneath it showed through, when he started managing their accounts and giving her a household budget and asking, with a little smile, whether she really needed to spend money on her pottery studio, she did the thing she had sworn at 9 she would never do. She stayed. She told herself the early man was the real one and the cruel one was the stress, the deals, the pressure. She told herself love was patient. She poured the most dangerous resource she had, which was not money but hope, into a man who spent it as carelessly as everything else. Her own mother had taught her that hope is the most expensive thing a woman can carry, and Adeline had carried it up 4 flights of stairs into a marriage every single day for 5 years, and tonight her husband had locked it out in the cold. She walked down the 4 flights in her wool socks, holding the cold iron railing, and let herself out the building's side door into the ice. The wind nearly took the breath out of her. The street was a sheet of black glass under the sodium lights, every parked car wearing a shell of frozen rain. Her own car, a 6-year-old Subaru wagon Spencer hated, because he said it looked like something a substitute teacher would drive, sat at the curb where she always left it. He never asked why she kept the cheap car. He never asked why it had a key fob she never let out of her sight, or why the windows looked a half-inch too thick. She unlocked it, slid into the driver's seat, and pulled the door shut against the storm. The silence inside was sudden and total. She pressed the ignition, and the engine turned over with a low, even hum, and she put the heat on full and held her stiff white hands in front of the vents and breathed. Then she picked up her phone, opened an app that lived behind a passcode and her thumbprint, and pressed the only contact in it. It rang once. Adeline. The voice that answered was low and unhurried, a man's voice with no sleep in it at all. Everett Lang had been general counsel for Ironwood Capital for 11 years, and in 11 years she had never once heard him surprised. Everett, he locked me out of the loft tonight. The woman's there. It's about 10 degrees out here. She kept her voice level, but she heard the steadiness in it that she had not heard in years, the voice she used in deposition rooms, the voice that did not belong to the woman in the gray dress. Don't send anyone into him. I want to be very clear about that. There was a pause, and when he spoke again she could hear the change underneath the calm, the way the temperature in a room changes before a storm. Where are you right now? Are you safe? Did he put hands on you? He grabbed my arm and put me out the door. She watched the loft windows 4 floors up, 2 warm rectangles of gold against the black building. I'm in the car. I'm warm. I'm fine. That's assault, Adeline. I can have people there in 20 minutes with a tactical extraction order, and I can have him in a holding cell by morning for it. A faint sound of typing started under his voice, fast and even. You don't have to do anything but say yes, no. She said it gently, but it was not a request. I don't want him touched. I don't want a single bruise on him that a lawyer could use. A bruise heals, Everett, and then he gets to tell people his crazy wife had him arrested. She watched a shape move past the window above, Sloane's silhouette, the borrowed wrap still around her shoulders. I don't want 20 minutes of fear. I want him to wake up tomorrow and find out that the life he thinks he built was never his. I want to take it back one piece at a time, with paperwork, the way you take apart a company. I want it to be completely legal and completely permanent." The typing stopped for a moment. "You're sure?" "He spent 4 years stealing from his own clients to keep up the show, and I let him, because I didn't want to know. I think I'm finally ready to know." She closed her eyes. "Pull the escrow records on Hartley and Crane. The client trust accounts. I think you'll find he's been moving money he doesn't own." A short silence, and then a sound she had not heard from Everett Lang in 11 years. Something close to a laugh, low and grim. "I've been watching those accounts for 14 months. I flagged it to you twice. You told me to wait. I know what I told you," she said. "I'm telling you something different now." "All right." His voice settled into something flat and certain, the voice of a man cracking his knuckles before work. "Walk me through what you want." She watched the gold windows and she told him. She wanted Spencer's access to Hartley and Crane revoked before sunrise, his keycard, his email, his login to the firm's systems, his name on the door. She wanted the board, which answered to Meridian, which answered to her, to be informed at their emergency dawn meeting of the forensic findings on the client escrow accounts. And she wanted Spencer terminated for cause the moment they convened. She wanted his leased Range Rover, which belonged to the firm, flagged and recalled. She wanted his brokerage accounts, and the firm credit cards he treated as personal ones, frozen the instant fraud was alleged, which it now would be. She wanted the loft, her loft, to begin eviction proceedings against its tenant of record for fraudulent occupancy, because the lease he held had never been worth the paper it was printed on. And she wanted the heat shut off. "The building's on the smart system Ironwood installed 2 years ago," she said. "His unit runs off the central plant. Shut down heat and hot water to that floor, and cut the elevator access and the keypad on his door so the locks he was so proud of stop working both ways. Let him sit in the cold for a while. He told me the cold helps a person remember their place." She heard her own breath fog the inside of the windshield. "Let's find out if he's right." "That last part isn't strictly necessary," Everett said, and there was something almost careful in it. "No," she agreed, "it isn't." She heard him exhale. "Consider it done. Adeline, there's a security detail I'd like to put on you regardless. 2 people. They sit at the end of the block. They don't approach. They're just there. After tonight, that isn't negotiable." "Fine," she said. "Tell them to keep their distance. I'm not leaving yet. You're going to sit there and watch. I'm going to sit here and watch." A beat. "One more thing," Everett said. "The associate, Sloan Briggs. She's on the Hartley and Crane payroll. She's been listed as a referral consultant on 2 of the deals where the escrow money went missing, and she's been paid out of the same accounts. Do you want her treated as a victim of his or as a participant?" Adeline thought about the cashmere wrap. She thought about the little waggle of fingers through the frosted glass. She thought about a woman who had stood in another woman's home, in another woman's clothes, and laughed at her in the dark. "She took the money," Adeline said. "She knew where it came from. Treat her exactly the way the facts say to treat her. Understood, Everett." She opened her eyes. "Thank you for waiting 14 months. I work for you," he said simply, and the line went dead. She set the phone face down on the passenger seat. The heater had finally won. Warmth was creeping back into her hands, into her feet, up the backs of her legs. She folded her arms and watched the 2 gold windows above her, and she waited. She did not have to wait long. At 11:40, the windows went dark. Not flickering, not a brownout. All at once, like a held breath let go. 1 second the loft glowed warm and gold against the black brick, and the next it was a hole in the building, lightless, the storm reflecting off its empty glass. Adeline imagined the chandelier over the dining table going out, the recessed lights, the warm lamp by the reading chair she used to sit in. She imagined the small sound a person makes when the world goes suddenly wrong. Up in the loft, Spencer Hartley swore in the dark and told Sloan it was the storm. A tree on a line, a transformer somewhere, nothing. He found his phone, turned on the flashlight, and went to the breaker panel by the laundry, and frowned at it, because every breaker was seated and on. He went to the thermostat, and it was a dead black rectangle. He noticed distantly that the radiant heat under the floors was already cooling, that the warmth was leaking out of the room, as if someone had pulled a plug. He tried to pull up the building's outage line on his phone, and the page spun and spun. He checked the signal and found, where its 5 bars usually sat, a small gray SOS only. The storm, he told himself. The storm was knocking everything down. He went to the window and looked out. expecting the whole block dark. Across the street, the condos glowed. Streetlights burned steady down the avenue, each one wearing a halo of freezing mist. The corner market's neon was on. Every building he could see had power. Only his windows were black. Sloane was complaining from the sofa, her voice gone thin and sharp, that it was freezing, that her phone wasn't working, that this was insane. Spencer told her to put on a sweater. He went to the sink for water, and the faucet gave a hollow cough of air and a few rusty drops, and then nothing. He tried the kitchen lights again, out of pure animal stubbornness, flipping the switch up and down, as if the wall might change its mind. Then he thought of his wife, out in the cold in her socks, and he felt the old comfortable warmth of contempt move through him, and it steadied him. She had finally gotten what she'd been asking for. He'd go let her in a while. Let her freeze a little longer. Let her learn. He went to the door to check the deadbolt and the keypad he'd had installed. The expensive smart lock he loved was dark. The little ring of light that usually glowed blue was off. He pressed his code and nothing happened. He pressed it again. The door was a slab of wood that no longer answered to him, and for the first time that night, standing in the cold dark of an apartment that would not turn on, Spencer Hartley felt the very first thread of something that was not annoyance. Down on the street, in the warm car, Adeline watched his flashlight beam sweep across the black windows, back and forth, hunting for an answer that was not in the room. She did not smile. She felt no joy, exactly. What she felt was the strange, weightless calm of setting down something she had carried for years. She thought about all the nights she had ironed his shirts, because he liked the collars a certain way, and the dry cleaners never got it right. All the dinners she had cooked from scratch, because he said restaurant food made him feel like a tourist in his own life. All the time she had quietly covered a shortfall in their joint account, out of money he didn't know she had, so that his pride would never have to feel the floor drop out. She had spent 5 years being the soft place a hard man landed, and he had mistaken her softness for weakness, the way men like him always did. Her mother used to say a thing, in the trailer outside Duluth, watching the second husband count the grocery money out into her open palm coin by coin. The way a man treats the people he's already done with, her mother would say, is just a preview, baby. That's how he'll treat you. The second he thinks he's done with you too. Adeline had watched the way Spencer talked about his ex-wife, the contempt that came off him whenever the woman's name came up, and she had told herself it was different. It was complicated. There were two sides. She had not let herself finish the thought her mother had started. She let herself finish it now, in the warm dark of the car. A man who puts his wife on an allowance, she thought, will put his mistress on one too. He never learned another way to love a woman. He only knows how to own her. Up there in the cold, Sloane Briggs was about to learn what kind of man she had won. At 1:15 in the morning, two things happened at once. In the loft, Spencer's personal phone finally died, drained by an hour of frantic hunting for a signal, and a second phone lit up. The encrypted device the firm issued him, the one tied to its own secure network, the one he kept for deals that needed to stay quiet. It buzzed on the kitchen island in the dark with a hard white light, and he lunged for it. And on the street below, around the far corner, two black SUVs turned onto the avenue, tires crunching the ice, and came to a slow stop across the mouth of the loft building's entrance. Adeline watched them in her mirrors. She had asked for paper, not soldiers, but Everett had clearly decided the eviction would be served in person, tonight, and she did not stop him. The doors of the lead vehicle opened and 4 people stepped out into the storm, in dark weather gear, unbothered by the ice, and crossed to the building's front door, with the unhurried certainty of people who already had every key they needed. Up in the loft, Spencer was reading the email on the firm phone with a face going gray. She could not see his face, of course, from the street, but she had read the email herself an hour ago when Everett sent her the draft. She knew what it said. It said that following an emergency forensic review, irregularities had been identified in the client trust accounts under his signature authority. It said his access to all firm systems and premises was revoked, effective immediately. It said the board would convene at 6 a.m., and that he should consider his employment terminated for cause. It said the firm's counsel had a legal obligation to report the misappropriation of client escrow funds to the state and to federal authorities, and that this obligation had been discharged at 12:50 a.m. She knew he would read it twice. She knew he would not believe it. An audit like that took months. Committees, outside firms, weeks of meetings. It did not arrive at 1 in the morning during an ice storm, 4 hours after a man had nudged his wife out a door. It was impossible. He would tell himself it was impossible while his hands started to shake. She knew he would open his laptop and try his bank and find a white page with a padlock and the words account restricted. Suspected fraud. Contact your branch with 2 forms of identification. She knew he would try the brokerage account where his real money lived and find a balance of 0 and a single line of text. Assets frozen pending investigation. She knew that everywhere he turned, the doors would already be shut, and that the speed of it would be the thing that finally broke something in him. Because Spencer Hartley's entire understanding of the world rested on the belief that he was always the fastest, smartest, most dangerous person in any room, and someone had just proven, in the space of one night, that he had never once been any of those things. What she could not have known, but later heard, was that Sloane Briggs's dead phone lit up too, pushed alive for 10 seconds by the same secure network, long enough to deliver one email from the firm's HR department, and that Sloane had read it by the light of the screen and started to scream, that she had thrown the borrowed cashmere wrap on the floor and stood up in the dark and told Spencer she was 26 years old. And he had handed her a federal wire fraud charge, wrapped up like a present. And what had he done? That he had told her to shut up and let him think. That she had shoved him, and he had shoved her back, hard enough that she hit the corner of the island. And that the 2 of them had stood in the freezing dark and said the cruelest things they knew to each other. 2 people who had been certain, an hour ago, that they were the winners, the way a man treats the people he's done with. The fist on the door came at 1:20. Adeline could not hear it from the street, but she could see the moment it landed, because the building's intercom system was hers too, and she had it patched to her phone. She heard the heavy triple knock through the speaker. She heard a calm, sterile voice she did not recognize. One of Everett's people. Say that the unit's occupant was in unlawful possession of property owned by the Cedar Trust, that the local authorities had been notified and instructed to stand down, and that the occupant had 2 minutes to open the door before it was opened for him. She heard Spencer's voice come back through the speaker, ragged, too loud. I own this apartment. I pay the mortgage. I'm calling the police. And then, a minute later, smaller. Why aren't they coming? Why won't they come? They were not coming because there was nothing for them to come to. There was a court-authorized eviction, a fraud investigation already in motion, and a private firm doing exactly what the paperwork permitted, and the dispatcher who took Spencer's call had a note in front of her telling her so. The police were standing down and observing, which is to say, they were not there at all. She heard the door give. Not a battering ram. Everett's people did not break things they did not have to break, but the smart lock, which answered to her now, simply unlatching itself with a soft mechanical sigh, and the door swinging open into the dark. She set the phone down. She did not need to hear the rest. She knew the shape of it. A flashlight, a folder of documents, a calm voice telling Spencer Hartley that he had 20 minutes to take 1 bag of clothing, that anything bought with firm money would be considered theft, that the gunmetal Range Rover in the garage was already on a flatbed. She knew there would be a moment when someone said the name Adeline Voss, and he would say, her name is Adeline Hartley. She does bookkeeping, and no one in the room would correct him, because it was not their job to explain his life to him. She watched the front door of the building 40 minutes later when they finally came out. They came out into the storm in the clothes they'd had on. Spencer in his shirt sleeves, and Sloane in her thin black dress with no coat. The 2 of them flinching as the freezing rain hit them, and they stood on the icy sidewalk under the awning, looking like what they were, which was 2 people who had nowhere to go. A tow truck pulled away from the parking garage exit with the Range Rover tilted up on its bed, and Spencer turned and watched it go. And even from across the street, Adeline could see something go out of him as it did. Then he saw the Subaru. She watched him recognize it. She watched him cross the slick street toward it, half skating, one arm out for balance, Sloane trailing behind him, with her arms wrapped around herself, and she let him come. When he reached the passenger window, she pressed the button and let the glass slide down 2 inches, and warm air smelling of the car's heater drifted out into the cold, and she looked at him. She knew what he was seeing. He had told her once, early on, that she had a sweet face, a soft face, the kind of face you wanted to come home to. The face looking back at him through the 2-inch gap was not that face. It was calm and dry and unhurried, and it belonged, she knew, to a stranger he had been married to for 5 years. Adeline. His voice cracked on it. The bourbon was long gone. What was left was just a man in the cold. Addie, I don't. What is happening? What did you do? Just let me in the car, okay? Let's talk. We can fix this. Whatever this is, we can fix it. Sloane crowded in at his shoulder, her teeth chattering. He told me you two were already getting divorced, she said, the words tumbling out fast. He told me it was basically over. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't. My accounts are frozen. I have nowhere to go. Adeline looked at them both. She had expected. When she imagined this moment over the years, she never let herself fully imagine it. That she would feel rage here, or grief, or some hot final thing. What she felt instead was nothing much at all. The kind of cool, level nothing you feel toward weather. Toward a problem already solved. You put me outside, Spencer, she said. Her voice carried easily through the gap, steady over the wind. You and Sloane stood in my home, and you locked me in the cold and you laughed. I'd been drinking. You were going through for my things. His knuckles were white where he gripped the top of the window. You took my job. You took my money. You took my house. I didn't take anything from you, she said. I stopped giving it to you. There's a difference, and you'll have a lot of time to think about it. She tilted her head, just slightly. The job was mine to give. The firm answers to a company that answers to me. The money you stole was never yours. It belonged to people who trusted you with it. And the house was always mine. I bought it the same year I married you. I let you put your name on the lease because your pride needed an address it could brag about. She let that sit a moment. I gave you a kingdom made out of paper, and you spent 5 years swaggering around inside it, telling everyone you'd built it with your own 2 hands. You never built anything. You just learned how to take credit for a roof someone quieter than you was holding up. He stared at her, the rain running down his face, and she watched the last of it leave him. The swagger, the certainty, the easy contempt that had been the whole engine of him. Underneath it, there was nothing. There had never been anything. That was the part that had taken her 5 years to see. I have nothing, he whispered. Adeline, I have nothing left. You have each other, she said, and turned her eyes to Sloane, who stood shivering in the borrowed black dress that was not warm enough for any of this. Adeline looked at her for a long moment, this young woman who had laughed at her through frosted glass. You wanted to know what it felt like to be the woman in this house. Now you know. He'll put you on an allowance inside a year if either of you stays out of prison. He'll count your money out into your hand. It's the only way he knows how to love anyone. She paused. You should both stay out here a while longer. He always said the cold helps a person remember their place. Please, Spencer said again, and his hand reached through the gap toward her, and she watched it the way you watch something you used to fear and no longer do. She pressed the button. The window slid up, smooth and quiet, closing his hand out into the storm, sealing the warmth and the smell of the heater back inside the car with her. Through the glass his mouth kept moving, but she could not hear it anymore, and after a moment she found she did not want to. She put the car in gear. The wipers swept the ice from the glass in 2 clean arcs. In the mirror she saw Sloane turn and walk away from him down the frozen sidewalk without a word, her arms wrapped around herself, and she saw Spencer turn in a slow circle in the middle of the empty icy street, looking up at the dark windows of a loft that had never been his, a man standing alone in the exact weather he had thought belonged only to other people. Adeline Voss pulled away from the curb. The tires found their grip on the ice, and the taillights of the old Subaru threw 2 small red shapes against the storm as she drove, unhurried, toward the river, toward a hotel where a warm room and a hot bath and the rest of her own life were waiting, the heater filling the car with the smell of vanilla and worn leather and faintly of freedom. She did not look back. She had spent 5 years looking back, waiting for a man to turn into who she'd hoped he was. She was done waiting. The thing about a woman who has learned to be quiet is that people mistake the quiet for the whole of her. They never think to ask what she's holding still about. And by the time they find out, she is already pulling away into the dark, warm and dry, and entirely her own, leaving the storm to the people who built it.